So today's session is a first in a series of webinars around digital skills for heritage. This particular one is focused on working with children and young people online. And here's everyone who's taking part today. So my name is Daniel. I am the Learning and Skills Development Manager within the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And if I can get my speakers to just turn your webcams on, and anyone who's not taking part, so so just as a reminder, Jill and Anne-Marie, if you use the little bar just beneath me, you click on the webcam icon, you'll turn off the webcam. Okay, Josie, can I get you to turn your webcam on and your microphone, and it'd be great to hear from you and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Josie Fraser. I'm really happy to be here today. It's great to be joined by so many people from right across the UK. I'm the new digital policy lead at the National Lottery Heritage Fund. I've been in post since January.
Wonderful, thank you. And Harriet?
Hello there, good afternoon to everybody. Like Josie said, it's lovely to see so many of you joining us. I'm Harriet Hall. I'm the Campaigns Project Manager at the National Lottery Heritage Fund.
And we're joined by colleagues from Childnet International, so Maithreyi.
Hi everyone, I'm Maithreyi Rajeshkumar. I'm the Policy and Communications Manager at Childnet, and I've been working on this guide.
And finally, Will.
Hi everybody, I'm Will Gardner. I'm the CEO at Childnet, and I'm also a director of the UK Safer Internet Centre, and I've been working with Maithreyi on this guide.
Wonderful, thank you. So Josie, we'll start with you with an update.
Great, it's okay, thank you. It's really great to be starting off today. So I'm going to give you a lightning speed run through around some of the reasons that we're here today and the kind of context of our conversation and the work that's going to happen today. We've been running the Digital Skills for Heritage programme, which is designed to support the whole sector in terms of raising their digital confidence and skills. It's obviously taken on new resonance and new urgency in response to the pandemic, with many organisations having to move online much more quickly than they'd imagined or planned for. What we've been doing is some important triage work with the sector, looking at what kinds of things the sector needs, where the gaps are, and along with our wider Digital Skills for Heritage programme, looking at filling those gaps and supporting you in your day-to-day work, which is now more often than not online rather than offline. One of the things that we identified very early on is that there's a lot of people who may be very confident around safeguarding issues with children and young people in physical spaces, but they haven't kind of considered, had the practice of what that means in digital spaces. So we have a huge amount of organisations who are specifically working with children and young people, who are now working with children and young people online much more than they were before. And we also have a lot of heritage organisations who work online. And as we know, online public spaces are spaces where children and young people are. So this part of our work particularly focuses on supporting organisations in keeping themselves and young children and young people safe online. We've got a huge commitment to engagement with children and young people at the National Lottery Heritage Fund. As people who are familiar with our work through the Kick the Dust programme, and our lead on that work and on our children and young people's policy, Sarah Lanchin, has been really helpful in driving this work forward. So we need to say a big thank you to her. There's a huge amount of reasons and ways that people need digital and that children need to be involved in heritage as well. I'm not going to take lots of time talking about that today, but I think particularly kind of timely at the moment that is just for us to remember that children and young people's journey through generations and through what's come before is really, really important for helping them to critically locate themselves in the world and understand the world and make sense of their place and take pride in their place in the world. So it's incredibly important. I'm also just going to quickly flag the fact that we have an ongoing survey that's running, that's designed to support all kinds of organisations through these times and beyond. It's called the DASH survey, and we'd encourage all organisations in attendance who are from the heritage sector to sign up to that if you haven't already. It's a way that we can provide ongoing support to you. There's lots and lots of things that people need support with. Today, we're really happy to be able to launch our new report from Childnet International that provides a practical introduction and support to the sector to online safety issues with children and young people. And I will hand over because that's what we're here to talk about today.
At this point, I'll bring in Wills, if you can start to share your presentation. Just note, if you're taking part today, other than speaking, you can keep your webcams turned off. Otherwise, everyone can see you. So, Will, over to you.
Thanks, Daniel. And thanks, Josie. Thanks for the introduction. It's been a real privilege to work together with you on this guide, and we're excited. A bit of background. So I'll just say who we are at Childnet, for those of you who don't know us. We are a children's charity. We are 25 years old this year, and our focus is to help make the internet a great and safe place for children. We are really positive about the potential for new technologies and children and young people, and we are actively trying to promote those. But at the same time, we know that there are inherent risks, and we need to be able to manage those risks effectively. And in the work that we do, we work in three main areas: in education and in policy, but also in giving young people voice in this area. We want young people to be part of the solution. And we are very actively using online platforms to reach out to our target audiences too, reaching out to children and young people, to parents and carers, and to teachers and to schools. I think in the education space, just to highlight, we are in schools every day talking to children from as young as 3 up until the age of 18, and we are developing educational materials to support schools in the teaching, to encourage them to talk about these really important topics, because online is so important in children's lives. In the policy space, we work with governments and industry. We have an early warning working group focusing specifically on COVID, where we bring helplines and hotlines together. So we are checking to see what impact lockdown is having on online risk and harm currently. And we develop guidance and policy. We've done guidance for government, guidance for schools on cyberbullying and preventing and responding to that, guidance at the moment to put out to guide teachers in safe and remote teaching and learning, and so on. So that's kind of where Childnet come from. We also are part of something called the UK Safer Internet Centre, and we organise Safer Internet Day every year. There we go. So the thing I want to talk about is, what does online bring to children and young people? Why young people online? And I think it's worth reminding ourselves about the amazing opportunities that the online environment offers to children and young people to connect, to create, and to discover. And I think in the current environment, so much of children's educational lives and social lives is much more online than it was. So what is it bringing to young people? On the slide in front of you, you can see some examples of how technology gives young people an opportunity of voice to reach out and get support from other young people. There's some videos from YouTube put up by Childline about young people connecting with other young people who are like them. Maybe they're growing up with stammer. Young people getting engaged with civic movements, the environment, environmental campaigns, Me Too. We know many young people are signing petitions, are very active in their community. There's the educational element, there's the entertainment side, but also young people are busy supporting each other in this environment and giving positive comments and being that good friend online. As friendships happen offline, young people are increasingly supporting each other in this online environment. So there is an awful lot. It's part and parcel of life. But at the same time, as young people are very immersed in this environment, we mustn't assume that they are digital natives and they know everything about how to look after themselves and their peers online. So it's really important that we are thinking about, well, what are the risks online? I think that's the starting point. And this is all included in the guide, where we do outline, well, what are the potential risks facing children online? And they've been classified into 4 C's: conduct, content, contact, and commercialism. And if I just very briefly run through those. So conduct, this is about how young people's own behavior online can put themselves at risk. For example, by oversharing information, sharing personal information, or sending inappropriate information, or even being actively a cyberbully, if you like, causing harm to someone else. In terms of content, this is inappropriate content that they might come across, and you can imagine for children this is age inappropriate content like pornography or violent content, but it can also be inaccurate information. And there is a risk inherent in taking what you see online very literally in this current, particularly in this current COVID situation, where there is a lot of inaccurate information circulating. Contact is about the inappropriate contact, so it could be including things like cyberbullying or contacts like for grooming, the potential sexual exploitation of children and how they might be made vulnerable in this way. And the commerce side is thinking about the data that children are sharing or the advertising that they are seeing. So that's kind of the kind of broad brush risks that we're talking about. And in the guide, we try and hone those in to see, well, how might that be relevant to the heritage sector? If you are creating an environment where you have an audience, but you don't know who your audience are, perhaps there will be situations where adults and children are online together. And what do you need to think through for such a situation? Or if you're encouraging young people or your audience to share, how can you make sure that they are sharing in a responsible way, so that you are being responsible in what you share too? So that's kind of a very brief outline of some of the risks. But we also did a survey, and Maithreyi will talk a bit more about the survey we did.
Hi everyone, I hope everybody can hear me. So as Will kind of mentioned, we did a survey with the Heritage Organisation. And it was amazing that so many of you responded to us. We had 89 respondents in a really, really quick, speedy time. So thank you, everybody who responded to us. It was so valuable to hear how quickly, as a sector, you were adapting to the COVID situation, using the skills that you had before, but also some of the concerns and worries that you were having around moving your work online as well. So we saw that there were some key themes that came out. So firstly, it was around new audiences. Many in the sector were saying this was actually an opportunity to reach new people that they may not have been able to reach before. It offered opportunity to make your work more inclusive, possibly reach young people, but also that because there were new audiences, not always sure how to do that, especially with young people, was, let's say, Instagram the best way to do this. Varying levels of access was mentioned quite a lot, that your audiences and communities had varying levels of access to internet, to technology, that this changed, and I'm sure that this echoes a lot of what you were kind of experiencing, especially working with young people. Lots and lots of people were saying, doing sessions and people dropping out of internet access, and I'm sure we've all had meetings like that as well. Organisations were also concerned around what were the safe platforms to use. There's obviously hundreds of different platforms, and whilst there's some that were popular, especially early on, it was really, really difficult to know what was the safest, the best platforms to actually use to reach the audiences. Guidelines. So many organisations were setting up guidelines, but also sometimes unsure what should go in those guidelines, both for themselves as staff, but for the volunteers that they might be working with, for the audiences they were reaching. And we had respondents from organisations from as small as 2 people working to much, much larger organisations. And you can imagine that guidelines were very, very different for these different sizes of organisations. Lack of confidence came out quite strongly, that whilst there was some really good practice being shown by the sector, confidence in knowing what to do, where to go for support if something went wrong, where to access information came up really strongly. And finally, really importantly, and obviously why we're writing this guide, was around protecting children. Whether organisations were directly working with children already, or they were reaching out to the public and children were going to engage, making sure that they were ensuring the platforms were safe, that they knew what to do if a problem arose, that they spotted other problems. A lot of organisations talked about just generally the mental health of the children that they were working with, especially during lockdown, and having to, there's a really good quote which is actually in the guide around an organisation saying, we don't expect our workers to become overnight counsellors, but they were having to support children with a wide range of problems that they were facing that wouldn't have necessarily come up before. But overwhelmingly, it was a really positive picture from the sector, and I think this quote really sums it up, that this organisation, Little Learning, a very small organisation, talks about, as their work's main targets is to future-proof children and to give them the necessary skills, this online engagement has opened up opportunities for some really exciting future programmes. And I think it has pushed the sector maybe a little bit quicker than we would have liked to, but to really look at how can we be innovative with reaching young people in different ways. So what's in the guide? So the feedback in the sector was overwhelmingly that everybody needed something that was really practical, and that's the approach that we really try to take, whilst also understanding that there is really no one-size-fits-all solution. We can't tell you exactly, this platform you should use in this way, because every organisation is very different. The activities that you engage in are going to be very different, as well as your audiences. But there are some key questions to ask for any organisation working with young people that you kind of need to think about. And also we thought it was an opportunity to really support with sort of making sure that you knew the right questions to ask, but also to signpost to some of the answers and practical resources and guidance that you could have. So throughout the guide, there are links to lots and lots of different practical resources, from policy templates to how to kind of guides to different platforms, to working with young people online, lots and lots of different things that you can kind of look through. We try and include real examples from other organisations. I think that kind of peer support and what we saw from the surveys is so important. That actually lots of organisations did have some really good ways in engaging young people online, and we try to include this as much as possible. And you can see that example from Royal Museums Greenwich. We pick out key points and checklists for you. We appreciate that everybody is very busy at this time, and whilst we could probably write a 100-page guide around this issue, we wanted to try and make it as useful as possible. So there are key points and checklists that once you've read through everything, that you can kind of go back to and remember, okay, these are the things that I really need to consider. And general guidance and pointers for you, importantly, to adapt to your setting. And I think that's what's really key. So throughout the guide, we firstly look through the risks, which Will has outlined, and that's outlined in the guide as well, and really looking at why it's important, particularly for your organisations. We look at the policies and guidelines that you should think about putting into practice. So again, we appreciate that your organisations will be of very different sizes, but what we know is that having something that's consistent across the organisation for your staff, your volunteers, but also for your communities is really key, and make sure that you're set up really well. And we also try and put some tips into actually putting that policy into practice, so that it isn't a dusty document that you save in a file somewhere and never look at. We talk about interacting with young people and how you do this. So whether that's the devices or the accounts that you use, things to consider if you're messaging or you're having one-to-one contact. Security issues as well, especially as we're all working from home. So what are the devices that we're looking at? Then we look at kind of 3 key areas that we we saw as really, really important for organisations during this time. Firstly, was around using social media as an organisation. So we looked at that in a little bit of depth in terms of what you need to think about and what you need to know, particularly around, asking children to submit content, how you share content. Children are doing amazing, creative, wonderful things, and we should be encouraging them to do that. But how do you share that and communicate with them safely through social media? Then we look at creating images and videos with young people, and really importantly establishing the consent process, so asking permission really, really early on, both with the young people and with their parents and carers, and making sure that they're really informed. And then finally, the final key area that we look at is hosting live events. And as we're doing now, there's all sorts of things that come up from technical issues, but really, are the platforms that you decide to use appropriate, safe and inclusive? Are they accessible to your audiences for your activity of choice? And we ask you to think about capacity and how you manage it effectively and make it interesting as well. And then finally, once we kind of go through all those key areas, we look at reporting and responding. Really importantly, what do you do if you see a problem, and really importantly, where do you go for help? And we hopefully signpost you to really, really useful organisations. So that's very, very quickly what's in the guide, but I really hope that all of you will go away and read the guide. And I believe that it's live now. So we wanted just very quickly to go through some really, really key principles for you to think about when interacting with young people online. Firstly, think about your unique situation. What is right for another project, even within your organisation or in another organisation, may not be right for you. And like I've said before, there isn't, unfortunately, a one-size-fits all approach. Even at Childnet, all our different projects, we have to develop different ways of working depending on the young people that we're working on and what we want to do. So think about that. Your audiences, your communities that you're working with, use that expertise and knowledge, and do your research, get to know the platforms, and we hope the guide will really help you do that research and really discuss that with your wider team. And think about what's right for your situation. We heard from organisations of 2 people who were doing really, really interesting things whilst being realistic with what they could do. They were really exploring different platforms and different ways of managing things. So it is definitely possible. Secondly is involve your communities. I know that the sector has had to respond so quickly to this, and now I think in some ways we have a bit of breathing space of thinking, okay, well, how do we really make sure that we are as accessible as possible, we're really meeting the needs of our audiences, and we're really getting across the content that we want. Hearing directly from them, make sure that you address their needs. And also they can come up with some really, really good solutions. So, for example, when we wrote this guide, we wanted to hear from you, and it's the same principle that you should be doing in terms of reaching your communities as well. Make sure everyone understands the rules, agree rules together and establish them together, and this will really make sure that it's embedded throughout your staff and volunteer team, and also the young people that you're interacting with. And think about different ways in which you can communicate them. Is it sending an email before you do a live event? Is it announcing it at the beginning of a session? And it probably is a combination of many different things. Fourthly, revisit your guidelines or policies. Policies, when you say the word policy, it's usually a pretty boring word, and we kind of groan when we think about them. And we really encourage you to think of them as living, breathing documents, or whether it's a video policy and you communicate it by a little short video to your young people you're working with. Make sure when you're trying a new platform, it doesn't mean rewriting the whole policy, but look back at it and think, okay, does this cover everything that I need to cover? And I know lots of organisations were updating their policies and re-looking at their guidelines as they started interacting more online. Finally, it's an obvious one, but enjoy working online. Obviously, when we look at all the risks and the issues that might arise, we can often have the tendency to want to retreat, but working online has an amazing potential reach, really to reach diverse audiences and reach young people through your work in ways that actually, are very, very new. And we know that young people really, really want to be part of many, many different activities. And it's a real opportunity for you to be at the forefront of that. So enjoy working online, interact with your young people and find out from them what suggestions they have for you as well. So those are our 5 key principles. Finally, I just want to touch upon where you can go for more help as well. And that's really, really important. I think what really came out very strongly in the survey was that there are lots and lots of different organisations, but often it can feel quite isolated and siloed, that you're trying to figure this out all by yourself. But there are so many different organisations who are figuring this out, and there's lots of support out there as well. So firstly, of course, come to us, childnet.com. We have lots of guidance from all different types of topics for professionals, people working in the educational sector, but also for parents and carers and for young people. And we have everything from, how parents can have conversations with their children about their online lives and experiences, to specific guidance on topics from grooming to live streaming to video chats that are really, really tailored for those specific situations as well. So there's a wealth of guidance. And we also have a very active blog section where we produce lots and lots of new advice on new services that are quite quick. So, for example, as soon as COVID started happening, we did a blog on House Party that lots of young people were on. We have a blog on Zoom, for example. So that's a really good way for you to keep up to date. And we have a newsletter that you can sign up to as well. Really importantly, and this is in the guide as well, I want to flag the Professionals Online Safety Helpline. They are a helpline for anybody working with children. So if you're working with children or interacting with them, they are a helpline available to you. And that is if any child that you are working with has an online safety issue, or if you as a professional yourself has an online safety issue. Maybe there's something around your own professional reputation that you're worried about. This helpline are really, really helpful. They have very, very good links with many, many different industry figures, and therefore they have a really, really good takedown rate on sites and services that you might be interacting with. And they can also just provide you with guidance and make sure that you're doing the right thing as well. Report Harmful Content is a site for anybody in the public, and they do 2 things. They provide advice on actually reporting on services, so that's social media, gaming, and different other services as well. But they also act as a mediation point. If you have reported already to one of those services, let's say you've reported to Instagram and you're not happy with the outcome, you can report to Report Harmful Content and they can help escalate that report for you as well. So that's something that anybody from age 13 upwards can use. So it's really, really useful. And of course, it's really, really important to remember to tell young people where they can go for support as well. So the Childline and the Mix are really, really good, helpful sites. But also in the guide, we've got some more organisations that children know, so that children know where they can go for. So that's a very, very quick introduction to what's in the guide. We hope that you'll read it and look forward to having more in the discussion. I'm going to pass back to Daniel now.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks very much for a really detailed presentation. We've added to the chat a link to the guidance itself, so you can actually start to have a read. We will be sharing an email following this session so that you've got a variety of different resources. And what we're going to do now is move over to the questions. These are the questions that you've been raising via the Padlet board. So thank you very much for doing that. And also, I can see some people have been commenting and providing other links to other resources from Proud Trust and Youth Work Support and others. So thank you very much for doing that. At this point, can I ask Josie, Will and Maithreyi to turn your webcams on because you'll be answering the questions. And when you're ready, Harriet, can I get you to read out the first question? And we'll do this a bit like question timing and get a response. So Harriet, over to you.
Okay. I think the one that ended up receiving the most likes was about inviting video submissions from young people. And somebody asked, I'm interested on guidance to safeguard young people and our organisation where we might invite young people to share video content as part of a creative project. What is the best gatekeeping process? And are there any pro formas we can follow so we have permissions to use this content, etc.?
So who would like to go with this first? Shall I? I'm going to choose Maithreyi. Do you want to go with that?
Yeah, sure. I can go with that. Well, I'm happy to say there is some example in the guidance. That's always really positive to say, oh God, yes, that is something that we've covered. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there isn't. It really depends on the activity that you're doing, but there are some general advice that you can kind of think about. So, firstly, in terms of creating it, think about what platform you're going to share on. If you're sharing on social media, make sure that you're not using personally identifiable information like their surname or, you know, we talk about personal information like being a puzzle. So if you provide too many pieces of that puzzle, it's very easy to locate children. If content's created by them, really encourage them to submit it to you, so you share it from your own organizational accounts rather than getting them to share on their social media and then sort of resharing and reposting, and that does take a little bit of a longer process, but it's important. And really importantly, building in consent from the very beginning of the process. Make sure they know what you're going to be using the content for, how you're going to be using it, where, how long you're going to be using it for, keeping it for. That's really important, and make sure that they know that if they change their mind at some point, there's some things that you can kind of do to say, okay, well, maybe we won't host it on our website if you decide that you're not happy with that. And in the guidance, we've actually signposted to the BBC editorial guidelines on working with children, which is actually really helpful. It's very detailed, but it gives you a good idea of what the big people do in terms of making sure that they protect children as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Will, anything more to add to that?
No, I think, to be honest, Maithreyi's covered everything, but in those guidance about how you get consent from parents at the same time, which is a really important part of that puzzle.
Lovely. And Josie, anything further? Cool. Harriet, next question.
This one's entitled Reaching New Young People Online. How do we build our engagement with young people, reaching new young people who aren't already involved through youth work structures such as youth groups in a safe and supportive way while working digitally due to lockdown? And then they say that trust and relationship building with young people and their parents, guardians, etc.
Brilliant, thank you. This time I'll go to Will.
I was hoping you might say Maithreyi, actually, to be honest. Because this is very much a kind of a communications question. I mean, in normal times, when we're at Childnet, we try and build our communities. We are very much operating through schools. You know, with the kind of, this is our easy access point to reach out to our community, to reach out to that broader audience. But in terms of building up a kind of a social media audience, I might defer to Maithreyi if I can.
Yeah, sure. I think this is a question that came up quite a lot in the survey, and I think unfortunately there isn't an easier answer, because the work that you do to engage young people online is the same as the work that you probably have to do offline. It's not an immediate thing that you can do, and it is slowly kind of building your audience and using, you know, other organizations that you can connect to who are doing a kind of good job. So we often think about, you know, connecting with some young people and then getting them to build that wider network through their peers is a really good way to build that trust. And you know, it's not easy, but it is about doing it slowly and really carefully. In the guide, we've got something around, you know, interacting with young people kind of safely, which hopefully will kind of cover some of that stuff around digital work as well, and signposted to Digital Youth UK as digital youth who also talk about interacting with young people. But I think, you know, not expecting too much. You're not going to have 10,000 followers on Instagram. We don't, and we've been working in this space for a long time, but making sure that it's kind of quality rather than quantity. And if you are looking at reaching a new audience, think about who else is connected into that audience. What other organizations can you partner up with them? Can you develop a new project with them? What are you giving young people as exciting, something that they're going to find really meaningful for them to engage with as well? Some things for you to think about.
Lovely. And Josie?
I'm going to take issue with you, Maithreyi. I think you might be underestimating the creativity of our audience. You don't know that one of the people in this room is not going to come up with a world-shattering meme tomorrow that's going to sweep the world and completely get lots of young people on board with them. However, that doesn't happen every day, you're quite right. And actually community building is a time that takes, it's a process that takes time. I think that really two key things I would say in terms of engage, well, three key things actually in terms of engaging with children and young people. One, be prepared in terms of that you are engaging with them responsibly. So our guidance is a brilliant place for you to start to understand what the kind of risks, what the kind of difficulties might be, to be able to think about them and identify those ahead of time. Two, engage young people. If you want to find young people, talk to young people about how to do it. Don't just get a group of grown-ups like us around the table talking, saying what we think is the case. Actually, you need to find young people to talk to, involve, if possible, get them to try, lead on the projects and the work that you're doing, because that way you will see real results. And then the third thing is around connections with organisations that already have those good connections. And as Will said, Childnet have got great links with a range of schools, and they've got a great reputation and some really good quality work to build on in terms of developing those reputations. Not every organisation has got those to start with, but what you will have is local communities, organisations like schools that will have good connections that you can start to approach and talk to, and go to them and tell them what they'll get out of working with you, and what their young people might get out of working with you. So they're my top tips, but no, not easy unless you're a meme genius.
Thank you very much, Josie. Next question, Harriet.
Just to follow up on that one, we got a response as you were all talking, just to say thanks for the useful reply. And they've added that it's really important reminder to feed back to project managers that it is a slow process and not to succumb to pressure from above. So following on from that one, sorry, I've just lost where I was reading that out. Where were we? Involving your communities, what models are there for including young people in governance and decision making in a safe way digitally?
So who would like to go with this question? Maithreyi. Oh no, Will, you go for it.
Yeah, I can share with you some of the things that we've done at Childnet, where we have a couple of projects that we run, and we specifically recruit. We went out to advertise to recruit some young people to be part of an advisory board to inform the work that we're doing. And it's almost like becoming like a co-creator or co-owner of projects that we've done. We've been able to bring together some extraordinary young people, really quite extraordinary, who already have very busy lives, but have real need for outlet for their passions about particular subjects. And we've had 10 young people on different projects come together to help support us in that direction. And what was brilliant, that when we finally revealed the end result of our project, they presented the outputs as their own. So they really actually took ownership for what we had done in that process. So I think it's about looking around and seeing what ideas there are out there in terms of including that young person's, trying to capture their enthusiasm and activism, but also to draw them into the process of the work that you're doing.
Lovely, thank you. Sarah, are you also online? Would you like to add anything further to that if you are free? That's Sarah Lanchin.
Yeah, I wondered, she may not be. She's available. Fantastic.
I think prepared for this. I've not brushed my hair.
Oh, well, thank you so much, and sorry for dragging you in. I just think that you've got boundless expertise in this area, rather than me pretending that I know, when you're working with projects that are actually achieving this all the time.
Yeah, I think probably to echo what Will was saying, that we've seen really great examples where when you're willing and able to give away some of your power and give that to young people, and for them to take ownership and take control of projects, they're more than capable and happy to lead and design and coordinate activities. And certainly, yes, it's been a real challenge for some of our projects to still operate through the lockdown. I'm sure everyone's experiencing those challenges. But we have seen that young people are really willing to still be engaged and use a variety of formats. I think, like what's been reflected already, it really is dependent on what works for you, what works within your policies and procedures as well. You know, we've had all of those same challenges around projects that can't use certain platforms because of certain policies, other projects that can, and it's a little bit of a balancing act. But certainly we have definitely seen that young people have still been engaged. So we've got some projects that have got youth forums that are still meeting digitally. We've got some projects that have got young producers and young creators who are still managing to coordinate and to develop work and move their activity online. So they're producing work for other people to be involved with as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Lucy put a comment in the chat box around when involving young people in the decision-making process, always think of the, consider the reward, whether it's additional training, free food, etc. So that's a really good point. Thank you very much for that. Maithreyi.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think, Lucy, that's a really good point. I know that our young people, we engage young people to be involved from as young as 7, and goodie bags are just amazingly useful. But also I think just giving young people something really concrete and helping them set the agenda. I think often we have a very specific agenda or a project that we want to achieve, and then we think, okay, right, we need some young people to help us create this project. But actually, if you give young people the opportunity to create what's really, really important to them, obviously connected to what you do, but where do they see their space? How can they contribute? And then giving them time to develop that idea. It's just, if I was going to do a project, I would be given training, I'd be given time to do research. Often we throw young people in and we say, okay, what do you think? Actually making sure that they have the time, the thinking space, that they have enough young people to work with, so there's not just 1 or 2 young people in a room full of lots and lots of adults. We try and really make sure that we balance it out. There's as little adults as possible, all of these things to make sure that you really develop their potential, really, because they can contribute amazing things if you give them the time and space to do so.
Absolutely, thank you. We'll move on to the next questions so we can squeeze in as many as we can. So Harriet, what's the next one?
The next one is, how can we work online with young LGBTQ+ people who might not be out / safe to be out at home? And just to say a quick thank you to the person that posted tons of really useful links underneath that for anyone that can go on the Padlet, they can see them in the comment.
So Josie, over to you.
Yeah, it's a really important question. I think for LGBTQI+ young people and children, online spaces are often really, really significant for them, and often sometimes the only space that they can kind of look at their own identities, develop themselves, have conversations with other people. Like a lot of vulnerable populations, there are different ways of working, but things around obviously anonymity and supporting people are incredibly important with certain communities, and especially communities who might actually suffer negative consequences as a result of being out online too. So providing those kinds of spaces, not putting pressure on people to be out online if they're not comfortable with that. And really being sensitive in terms of understanding the types of digital environments that actually might make people more confident and more comfortable to be able to have those conversations. I'll pass over to Childnet on that one, I think, but do want to say thank you very much for raising that point. I think it's a really important one.
Yeah, I think echoing what Josie said, and we've actually just this year produced guidance for Stonewall around supporting LGBT+ queer youth online as well. And I think it's really important to kind of recognise that whether young people identify as LGBT or not, that all young people are not a homogenous group anyway, and they'll all have different experiences and different home situations. So just because you're one LGBT young person doesn't necessarily mean that your experience is going to be the same as another. So it's really important for us as professionals, as practitioners, to really listen to what they're saying and what they're experiencing. Again, just go really slowly and go on that journey with them, and make sure that they know that there are various avenues for support out there, and explore with them. It can be a really difficult journey, especially if you can't be out and you don't feel safe at home, especially during a lockdown situation. So it's about signposting as much as possible to them.
Lovely, thank you. I'll move on to the next question, and thank you for the additional comment about this LGBT Youth Scotland, which is a great resource for further information. Harriet, what's the next question?
Oh, sorry, someone posted another one and they all moved. The next one was, oh, that was it, sorry. How to inspire digitally. How do you get young people to care about something that happened 400 years ago without going and talking to them? This one received quite a few likes.
Good question. Josie.
I'm happy to. So I've spent most of my career in digital having conversations with people about the difference between what's called real life and what's called digital. And actually now more than ever, it's really, really apparent that those spaces are all part of our lives, our day-to-day lives. They overlap. They have different kinds of things that you can do with them. They have, lots of strengths, lots of weaknesses in both physical and digital spaces. And I'm really hopeful that actually one of the things that people's more growing familiarity with online spaces teaches them that actually lots of really important things go on online, and people have emotions about what goes on online. People get upset, people get excited, people organise together, people do countless things online that are very, very real, and are no less real than the fact that they've got a screen in front of them and they're connecting through a screen rather than in a physical space. So the first thing I'd say is, if you've got a great story to tell about the past, that's a great story to tell about the past in any forum. I think part of the work that we're doing at the National Lottery Heritage Fund at the moment is to try and really support the sector into gaining confidence and gaining understanding of the huge range of different ways that digital can be used to tell those stories in really compelling ways that do connect to audiences of all kinds, whether they're young people, whether they're older people, whether they're people who don't speak English as a first language. There's huge opportunities for that. So I'd push back a little bit on the question, and I'd say the way to connect with the kind of amazing stories that we have to tell in the sector is to find ways to tell those stories better in digital environments. And please do sign up for the Dash survey, because that will connect you to a whole wealth of resources that will support your organisation in telling and keeping and sharing those really valuable stories.
I just want to share, there was a great example from an organisation who had responded to the survey, and they had started creating games for young people. And I think gaming is an amazing way to get young people interested in things 400 years ago. Most games are either fantasy or historical based, the ones that are really successful. So I think they're a great way to start.
Will.
Also, just very briefly to add, I know that in our online safety work, we've just been working to produce a 2-pager for schools about how you embed online safety throughout the whole curriculum at school, including music and PE and other areas, because actually this is an issue that's relevant to everything. And I know one of the examples for history, so I'm really honing in on the question, is about, well, why don't you look to create a social media profile for somebody from the period in time that you're talking about? How do you kind of engender that collision between the digital tools like the gaming that Maithreyi was talking about, and the experience that you're trying to convey.
Wonderful, thank you. Harry, have you got another question for us?
Yes, this one's a bit more general, and I suppose they're also asking if other people on the call have ideas as well, and if they do, please share them on the Padlet. But it was this person would like to know how others successfully cascade relevant and important information to their volunteers who may not be particularly internet confident.
So I'll start with this time with Maithreyi. Anything to add?
I'm not sure I have a huge amount of expertise. I might pass on to Josie. Some interesting things that did come out on the survey was actually just using things like text messages and emails and phone calls. Like, just because we're saying go do lots of online things, don't forget about the other modes of contact that you have. A simple phone call is sometimes just the best way, or a text message. So I think that's something that came out in the survey, but I probably will pass on to Josie for that.
Josie.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because as we know, there's a small percentage of people for various reasons, and those reasons tend to be poverty or lack of resource, or geographic location. Some people can't connect, or actually not really understanding what the point of going online is. There's quite a few people that we know who are not connected, who aren't necessarily disadvantaged in other ways, but just really don't see the advantages of being connected. I think that obviously digital has changed things for people in that latter category. It's not probably changed things as much as we would like for people in the other categories, unfortunately. So there will be people that still struggle to get online, and also there will be people who at a very stressful time prefer ways and things that they are familiar with, and that's completely understandable. So it's a tricky question for a technologist, because I spend basically my career promoting people to go online, and being aware of that kind of digital divide and wanting to address it. I think there are things that you can do though, and I think there's a kind of old-fashioned type activism and in terms of community change has got a lot of lessons for us. So in the olden days, the oldie days, before we had mobile phones and the internet, people would have set up phone trees, they would set up letter trees, they would make sure that there was kind of community central points, if that's possible, over spaces. So I think there's a huge amount of great practice actually we can learn from the past in terms of keeping in touch with people who are maybe not connected for a whole range of reasons.
Lovely, thank you very much for that. We'll take one last question. Harriet, you've got a question for us?
Yes, I was saving this one to last because I know it was posted before we did the session, but I thought this might be a nice one for you guys to highlight your key point for people to take away. But this person's posted, I run a young archaeology club, and I know a lot of YAC branch leaders like myself are starting to think about running online sessions with very little experience or background in this type of work. So do you have any key pointers, particularly when it comes to assessing risk?
So we'll start this time with Maithreyi.
So hopefully the guide will address some of that. I think that the main things that kind of run throughout all the different areas that we talked about, and I talked about social media and hosting live online events, is do your research. Don't expect to know everything immediately. Go and explore the platforms. Go and look through the security settings, and do all of those kinds of things. And it's something that we're constantly having to learn ourselves as well. Every time a new site comes in, I know in the office we're checking the latest game, and we're all seeing if we can report each other, or whatever that is. And that's a learning process constantly that we're having to do, and something where I'm almost always constantly almost accidentally reporting Will, because it's about testing the services that you're on. That's a really, really important place to start. Consulting your audiences, I think, is a really, really important thing. Find out from the young people or your volunteers what they're using. Cast do a survey. Find out if people have certain good kind of practice examples. And I think apart from kind of doing a research and kind of checking in, is that making sure that in terms of your kind of risk assessments, and we've got kind of policy templates and things that you can use, but really, I really urge everybody to really make sure that they adapt it to their own organisation. You can download a 40-page risk assessment template from the NSPCC, which is amazing and comprehensive and really, really useful. But unless you've actually gone and done that work and gone through, okay, what does this actually mean in our situation, you're not going to be able to respond really, really quickly. And you often have to do that when you're interacting with children online. It might be within a fraction of a second. And it's not saying that you need to know all the answers, but you need to have gone through the process to really understand, okay, what should I do? How do I escalate this? How do I say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to support you moving forward. And importantly, to do that is to make sure that everybody is part of that kind of risk assessment process.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the answer. And briefly, Will, anything more to add? And then I'll come to Josie.
No, well, not really. Apart from, as Maithreyi said, there's some useful documents in the guide that can help, guide you through that process. I think there's some big fundamentals in the guide about, trying not only to be looking after the young people, but also to look after yourself. So one of the key things is about using a professional account. Don't use your personal accounts to do those communication processes. And I think, it's things like that that are very practical and very simple that you can easily identify and think through as you work through this process.
Josie.
Just a quick tip from me, just keep an eye out on who you might be excluding by using certain platforms, because there will be young people who will not use Facebook, for example, or who will not use certain mainstream platforms for various reasons, none of which are illegitimate. It's obviously their choice. So kind of keep an eye out. If you are using a mainstream commercial platform, make sure that people in your group are comfortable with that. And if not, think about using a kind of somewhere a bit more neutral.
Oh, I appear to. There we go. Okay, so I thought I lost all the controls then. Thank you very much. Hopefully everyone's found today really useful. We are now out of time. We will share with you an email which will contain links to the DASH survey, the guidance, as well as an evaluation link. There is, I've just shared that link, so it'd be great to hear some feedback from you. That would be amazing. We'll also try and get you answers to any of the questions that we've not had time for as well. At this point, I just want to say thank you for everyone taking part. So for Josie, Will and Maithreyi, thank you very much for today. And I hope everyone has an excellent day. See you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.